High up in the Himalayas, a really tense and often violent standoff is unfolding. On one side, you've got an estimated 60,000 Chinese soldiers, backed by tanks and jets, and on the other, nearly 200,000 Indian troops. Now, this isn't just some remote border dispute. This is a face-off between the two most populous nations on Earth, both nuclear-armed, on what is literally the highest battlefield in the world.
But here's the part that just doesn't make sense. Despite having these massive modern military arsenals, when the soldiers actually clash up there, the fighting looks like something straight out of the Middle Ages. So what is really going on? Why are these powerful, high-tech armies resorting to medieval brawls? I mean, the contrast is jarring. You have two countries with the latest military hardware, but their deadliest clashes involve hand-to-hand combat, using rocks and nail-studded clubs. And get this isn't some accident. It's actually by design. And the reason is locked away in a decades-old agreement. And all of it, is happening in one of the most brutal environments on the entire planet. We're talking about altitudes over 4,000 meters, where temperatures can just plummet to minus 12 degrees Celsius. That's about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. In this grueling, completely inhospitable landscape, the weather itself is a constant enemy. So the root of this really strange combat actually lies in an agreement from 1996. See, to try and de-escalate tensions, both sides agreed to ban firearms and explosives near the border. But here's the unintended consequence: a policy that has pretty much institutionalized this primitive, incredibly brutal form of fighting. It doesn't prevent death. It just changes the method. Okay, so to understand why they're even willing to fight under these bizarre conditions, we first have to look at the massive economic stakes. For China, it all comes down to a multi-billion-dollar gamble that is just, well, it's too big to fail. This is what China's leadership calls the Malacca dilemma. A staggering 85% of China's oil has to pass through the Strait of Malacca, a choke point that's only 1.7 miles wide. In any major conflict, the U.S. and its allies could easily blockade this strait, and that would cripple China's energy supply. It's their single greatest strategic vulnerability. So what's their solution? It's called the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. It's this huge network of roads, railways, and pipelines that creates a brand new trade artery. It completely bypasses the Malacca dilemma, cutting a 12,000-kilometer sea journey all the way down to a 2,000-kilometer route over land and sea. And the price tag for this strategic security? A massive $65 billion. So you see, this isn't just an infrastructure project. It's a cornerstone of China's entire global strategy. It creates a direct link for them to the Middle East, to Africa, and to Europe.
But here's the huge problem. This multi-billion-dollar corridor runs right through Pakistan-administered Kashmir, which is a territory that India claims as its own. This means China's most vital new trade route is just a few kilometers away from tens of thousands of Indian troops, turning an economic project into a permanent military flashpoint.
But economics is only part of the story. There's an even more fundamental resource at stake here, something far more precious than oil or trade routes. We're talking about water.
The region they're fighting over, the Tibetan Plateau, is often called the Third Pole, and for good reason. It is the source of Asia's greatest rivers, and it provides fresh water to, get this, 1/5 of the entire global population. A staggering number. Now for India, the stakes could not be higher. The country is home to 18% of the world's population, but it only has access to about 4% of its fresh water. This critical imbalance makes it one of the most water-stressed nations on Earth, and it's utterly dependent on the rivers that flow from the Himalayas.
So at the end of the day, control over this high-altitude territory means control over the water taps for over 1 billion people. For China, it secures the headwaters of its own major rivers, the Yellow and the Yangtze. For India, it's the source of the Ganges and the Brahmaputra. This is a life-or-death existential issue for both nations. These modern tensions over money and resources are all layered right on top of more than a century of unresolved history. To really understand today's clashes, you have to look back, because this border itself was basically born from conflict. It really kicks off in 1914, when British India and Tibet drew up something called the McMahon Line, a border that China never, ever recognized. After years of rising tension, this all boiled over into the 1962 Sino-Indian War, where China seized territory and set up a new de facto border. Then came that 1996 firearms ban, which completely changed the nature of the conflict and led directly to events like the 2020 Galwan Valley Clash, the deadliest confrontation in decades. All of this history has left the two armies separated by what's called the Line of Actual Control, or the LAC. Now, it's a 3,400-kilometer ceasefire line, not an official internationally recognized border. And because neither country can agree on its exact location, patrols are constantly facing off in this dangerous high-stakes game of push and shove. But this whole conflict isn't just about a line on a map. It's really a focal point in what some people are calling the new great game, a much bigger geopolitical contest for dominance and influence across the whole of Asia. And a key player in this game is Pakistan. Through its deep investments, China has secured some serious influence there. It holds nearly a quarter of Pakistan's international debt. It's got a 40-year lease on the strategic Gwadar port. And of course, it's poured in that $65 billion for the CPEC project. All of this gives Beijing immense leverage in a country that shares a very volatile border with India. Now, while Beijing often speaks out against Western imperialism, its own strategy has drawn a lot of criticism. Some analysts are framing it as a, quote, nuanced, subtle version of colonialism for the 21st century, basically using debt and investment to achieve strategic goals where military force just isn't an option. So, this is the situation as it stands today, a medieval conflict being fought by nuclear powers in the 21st century. It's a struggle for strategic heights, for control of water, and for the security of vital economic lifelines. The real question is, how will this rivalry, fought with sticks and stones on the roof of the world, ultimately define the balance of power for an entire continent?